Yo, what's the word? It's your boy Fat from the hood, and I'm back at you again with another one. This time we're reacting to the Federal Bureau of Investigations locking up 234 judges over a span of about 5 states. Yeah. Do me a favor, man. Go on, like this video, hit that thumbs up, so we can spread the word, get this information out. Yeah, it's real treacherous. When I tell you it's rigged, this shit be rigged. Apparently, these judges were being paid off by the Sinaloa Cartel. They just spent over $1.8 billion paying these judges off. So far, the feds then confiscated $1.3 billion worth of shit back from the judges. And it looked like it's been over a 12-year span. Crazy, right? Check this out.
At 6 a.m. the Ferry, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced the arrest of 234 judges across 7 states. This is not a handful of corrupt judges. This is not a dozen justices taking bribes. This is 234 judges representing every level of the judicial system. From traffic court judges who handle speeding tickets to municipal court judges, to county judges handling felonies, to superior court judges, to appellate court judges, and yes, even state Supreme Court justices.
These motherfuckers don't give a fuck.
According to federal prosecutors, the Sinaloa Cartel executed a deliberate systematic strategy over 12 years to corrupt the judicial systems of 7 southwestern states: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, and Utah. They targeted judges at every level in every type of court by creating what the Attorney General called this morning the most comprehensive corruption of American justice in our nation's history. This is a story about how a Mexican drug cartel didn't just corrupt individual judges, but corrupted entire judicial systems, ensuring that from the lowest traffic court to the highest state Supreme Court, justice was for sale. Today, I'm going to walk you through what happened and what it means for America. Let me start with the extraordinary facts of what happened this morning across 7 states. At 6 a.m., local time in each state, coordinated teams of FBI agents executed arrest warrants at the homes of 234 judges. This represented the largest coordinated law enforcement operation targeting the judiciary in United States history. Over 3,000 FBI agents, along with thousands of state and local law enforcement officers, participated in the operation. According to the Department of Justice, the arrested judges include 47 traffic court and municipal court judges who handle minor violations and misdemeanors, 89 county-level judges who handle felony criminal cases, civil cases, and family matters, 63 superior court judges who handle major criminal trials and appeals from lower courts, 28 appellate court judges who review decisions from trial courts, and 7 state Supreme Court justices, the highest judicial authorities in their respective states. The lead defendant is Chief Justice Maria Sandoval of the New Mexico Supreme Court, age 58, who, according to federal prosecutors, served as the primary coordinator of the entire corruption network. Sandoval allegedly worked directly with high-ranking Sinaloa cartel leaders to identify, recruit, and manage corrupt judges across all 7 states. But this operation didn't target just one cartel representative network. Federal prosecutors say this was a strategic initiative by the Sinaloa cartel leadership to systematically corrupt judicial systems in states critical to their drug trafficking operations. The cartel allocated approximately $1.8 billion over 12 years to this corruption effort. Every arrested judge faces federal charges including racketeering, conspiracy, bribery, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The sheer scale of the case required the Department of Justice to establish a special prosecution unit with over 100 federal prosecutors dedicated solely to this case. The indictment, which remains partially sealed due to ongoing investigations, reportedly exceeds 1,000 pages and details 12 years of systematic judicial corruption across 7 states. Attorney General Pamela Bondi stated this morning, the Sinaloa cartel executed a strategic plan to own the judicial system in 7 American states. They succeeded. Today we begin taking our courts back. To understand how this happened, we need to understand the Sinaloa cartel's strategic thinking about judicial corruption. According to the FBI's investigation, which began in 2020, The Sinaloa cartel learned through experience that traditional approaches to dealing with law enforcement, such as avoiding arrest, using violence, or corrupting individual officials, were not sufficient to protect their multi-billion-dollar operations in the United States. The cartel needed a more comprehensive approach. Internal cartel communications intercepted by the DEA show that around 2012, cartel leadership made a strategic decision to invest massive resources in corrupting American judicial systems, reasoning that if they controlled the courts, arrests by law enforcement would become meaningless. The strategy was sophisticated and long-term. Rather than simply bribing judges case by case, the cartel decided to systematically identify and corrupt judges at every level of judicial systems in states critical to their operations. The goal was to create redundancy so that no matter what court a case ended up in, no matter what level of appeal, there would be a corrupt judge who could ensure a favorable outcome. The operation began in California and Arizona in 2013 and 2014. The cartel identified Chief Justice Sandoval, who was then serving as a New Mexico appellate judge, as someone who could coordinate a systematic corruption effort. According to court documents, Sandoval had significant financial problems and was vulnerable to recruitment. The cartel approached Sandoval through intermediaries and made an extraordinary offer. If she would coordinate a systematic effort to corrupt judges throughout the southwestern United States, she would receive $50 million initially, plus ongoing payments of $10 million per year. In exchange, she would identify vulnerable judges, coordinate recruitment, manage payments, and ensure that corrupt judges made decisions favorable to cartel interests.
The Fed's efforts to dismantle a major drug cartel is taking shape right here in the St. Louis region. Alleged local drug traffickers were busted a few years ago, but the investigation didn't stop. As Fox Files investigator Chad Mira reports, this drug case has now led to accusations of terrorism.
Despite appearances, this is not your typical drug case. What started as a local drug bust has led investigators down a long road. There have been raids and a shootout and now dozens of indictments leading all the way across the country down to the Sinaloa cartel. Evans admitted he coordinated the shipment of a Honda Odyssey like this one that was loaded onto a car hauler headed to St. Louis. In the floorboard of that van, 27 kilograms of meth from the West Coast. In the words of the judge, enough meth to wipe out St. Clair County. His sentence, 1 day with credit for time served. Those drugs traced all the way back to the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. Their idea of how investigators connected the dots. Defendants who have pleaded guilty have submitted stipulations of facts admitting their roles. In one, a person claimed to buy drugs from a source of supply in Chicago. Another man said drugs were stored in his St. Louis warehouse. Others to help deal the drugs. Another defendant claimed to run drug proceeds to Arizona. And a woman said she helped launder money to Mexico. Several of the defendants said they were working with Earl Frank out of O'Fallon, Illinois. An ATF affidavit says on June 6, 2025, federal agents tried to arrest Frank, who was staying in a motel room tucked away in the back of the Royal Budget Inn in East St. Louis. When a deputy U.S. Marshal opened the door, investigators say Frank fired at them, but missed. After a 15-minute standoff, he was taken into custody. With these local suspects in custody, investigators continued to trace the drugs.
And they operate through a distribution network.
They say they've uncovered a drug pipeline with connections to Chicago, California, Arizona, where a detention order claimed a man working at a drug treatment facility is allegedly a critical connection between the Metro East and the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico.
According to federal prosecutors, Sandoval accepted, and over the next 12 years, she built what amounts to a corruption empire spanning 7 states and encompassing 234 judges. The recruitment process was methodical. Sandoval would identify judges who had financial problems, gambling debts, expensive lifestyles they couldn't afford, family members with addiction or legal problems, or other vulnerabilities. She would either approach them directly or work through trusted intermediaries, usually attorneys with cartel connections. The initial pitch to potential recruits was simple: substantial money in exchange for making decisions favorable to cartel interests when opportunities arose. For traffic court judges, this might mean dismissing DUI cases against cartel drivers or ignoring suspicious traffic stops. For municipal judges, this might mean releasing defendants on low bail or dismissing drug possession charges. For superior court judges, this meant excluding evidence, reducing charges, or imposing minimal sentences. For appellate judges, this meant overturning convictions, and for state Supreme Court justices, this meant creating legal precedents that made prosecution more difficult. The payments varied based on the judge's level and importance. According to the indictment, traffic court judges received between $50,000 and $200,000 per year. Municipal judges received between $200,000 and $500,000 per year. County judges received between $500,000 and $1 million per year. Superior Court judges received between $1 million and $3 million per year. Appellate judges received between $3 million and $5 million per year. And state Supreme Court justices received between $5 million and $20 million per year. Over 12 years, the Sinaloa Cartel spent approximately $1.8 billion corrupting these 234 judges. But that investment protected drug trafficking operations, generating tens of billions of dollars in revenue. Now, let me explain how federal authorities discovered this systematic corruption and built the case that led to this morning's arrests. The investigation began in 2020, when a federal prosecutor in Arizona noticed disturbing patterns in how drug cases were being handled in state courts. Defendants with obvious cartel connections seemed to be receiving extraordinarily favorable treatment at every level of the judicial system. Traffic stops of cartel couriers were being dismissed on questionable grounds. Drug possession cases were being reduced to minor charges. Major trafficking cases were seeing evidence excluded or convictions overturned on appeal. And these patterns were appearing across multiple counties and multiple types of courts. The prosecutor brought her concerns to the FBI's Phoenix field office. The FBI began a preliminary inquiry focused initially on Arizona, but quickly discovered similar patterns in other southwestern states. By mid-2020, the FBI had enough evidence to justify a major corruption investigation spanning multiple states. The scope of what they discovered was shocking. This wasn't a matter of a few corrupt judges. This appeared to be systematic corruption across entire judicial systems. The FBI realized they were investigating what might be the largest judicial corruption case in American history. The investigation required unprecedented resources. The FBI established a special task force with over 500 agents dedicated solely to this case. They coordinated with U.S. attorneys' offices in all 7 affected states, and they implemented the highest levels of operational security to prevent corrupt judges from being warned about the investigation. The investigative approach was multifaceted. Federal agents examined financial records of hundreds of judges, looking for unexplained wealth, offshore accounts, large cash deposits, and expensive purchases inconsistent with judicial salaries. They found that dozens of judges had accumulated millions of dollars in unexplained assets. They analyzed thousands of court cases looking for patterns of favorable treatment for defendants with cartel connections. They found over 2,300 cases across 7 states where judges made decisions that appeared designed to benefit cartel interests. In 2021, the FBI successfully recruited a cooperating witness, a lawyer who had been serving as an intermediary between the cartel and corrupt judges. This lawyer, facing serious unrelated charges, agreed to work with federal authorities in exchange for leniency. The cooperating witness provided crucial testimony. He identified Chief Justice Sandoval as the coordinator of the corruption network. He described how judges were recruited, how payments were made, and how the system functioned. He also agreed to wear a recording device in meetings with corrupt judges. Over the next 2 years, the FBI collected hundreds of hours of recorded conversations. In these recordings, judges openly discussed their corruption, coordinated decisions in specific cases, and talked about payments they had received or expected. The FBI also obtained authorization for extensive wiretaps on the phones of dozens of judges and cartel intermediaries. These wiretaps revealed direct communication between judges and cartel representatives. They showed judges receiving instructions about specific cases and reporting on actions they had taken. By 2023, the FBI had identified over 200 judges who appeared to be part of the corruption network. The challenge then became confirming evidence against each judge and building prosecutable cases against all of them. The investigation continued for 2 more years as agents gathered financial evidence, recorded conversations, analyzed case patterns, and prepared the massive indictment. The goal was to arrest all corrupt judges simultaneously to prevent any from fleeing or destroying evidence. Let me explain how this corruption network functioned across 7 states and multiple levels of courts. According to federal prosecutors, Chief Justice Sandoval coordinated the entire operation from her position on the New Mexico Supreme Court. She maintained regular communication with cartel leadership through encrypted channels and through trusted intermediaries. The network was organized regionally. Each state had regional coordinators, typically senior judges, who managed corruption efforts in their states. These coordinators reported to Sandoval and received direction from cartel representatives about priorities and cases requiring attention. Within each state, judges were organized by court level. Traffic and municipal judges formed the first line of defense for cartel operations. When cartel drivers or low-level members were arrested for traffic violations, drug possession, or other minor charges, these judges would dismiss cases, reduce charges, or impose minimal penalties. County and superior court judges handling felony cases would exclude evidence obtained through searches or wiretaps, rule that prosecutorial procedures were improper, accept plea bargains that dramatically reduced charges, and impose sentences far below guidelines. Appellate judges would overturn convictions from lower courts, rule that trial judges had committed errors requiring new trials, and create legal precedents that made future prosecutions more difficult. State Supreme Court justices would issue rulings on major legal questions that favored cartel interests, such as limiting law enforcement's ability to conduct searches, or restricting the admissibility of certain types of evidence, and interpreting criminal statutes narrowly. The system created multiple layers of protection for cartel operations. If a cartel member was arrested and convicted despite a corrupt trial judge, there were corrupt appellate judges who could overturn the conviction. If that failed, there were corrupt state Supreme Court justices who could intervene. Communication within the network was carefully managed. Judges used encrypted messaging applications and burner phones to coordinate with each other and with cartel representatives. They used code words when discussing cases and payments, and they avoided putting anything in writing that could directly prove corruption. The payment system was sophisticated. Judges never received direct payments from known cartel members. Instead, their payments were laundered through multiple layers. The cartel would transfer money to shell companies in Mexico or offshore tax havens. These companies would then make payments to other shell companies controlled by attorneys or business people with no obvious cartel connection. Finally, money would flow to judges through various mechanisms, including fake consulting payments, real estate transactions at inflated prices, loans that were never repaid, or cash delivered through intermediaries. Now, let me give you numbers that help us understand the unprecedented scope of this corruption. 234 judges represents approximately 8% of all judges in the 7 affected states. In some counties and judicial districts, the majority of judges were corrupt. In 3 counties in California, federal authorities believe that every single judge at every level was part of the corruption network. Over 12 years, federal prosecutors have identified approximately 23,800 criminal cases where corrupt judges made decisions that appear designed to benefit cartel interests. That's an average of approximately 1,983 cases per year, or more than 5 cases per day across 7 states. These cases include 6,247 cases where charges were dismissed or significantly reduced at the trial court level, 4,893 cases where evidence was excluded, resulting in acquittals or dismissed charges, 3,678 cases where sentences were far below guidelines or minimums were not applied, 2,890 cases where convictions were overturned on appeal, and 5,092 cases where other favorable rulings were issued. In total, the prosecutors estimate that defendants who should have collectively served more than 78,000 years in prison either went free or served minimal sentences because of corrupt judicial decisions. The financial scale is staggering. The Sinaloa cartel spent approximately $1.8 billion over 12 years corrupting these 234 judges. That's an average of $150 million per year, or about $7.7 million per judge over the 12-year period. But this investment protected drug trafficking operations that generated an estimated $160 billion in revenue over the same period. From the cartel's business perspective, spending just over 1% of revenue on judicial corruption was extraordinarily cost-effective. The violence associated with protecting these operations was significant. Federal authorities have linked the cartel's operations in these 7 states to over 800 murders, thousands of assaults, and widespread intimidation of witnesses and rival traffickers during the period when judicial systems were corrupted. The seized assets from the 234 judges total approximately $1.3 billion so far. This includes over 600 residential properties, 150 commercial properties, 430 vehicles, dozens of boats and aircraft, extensive jewelry and artwork, offshore accounts, and cash. Federal authorities are still identifying and seizing additional assets. What does this case tell us about the vulnerability of American institutions to corruption and about the power of drug cartels? First, this case demonstrates that no institution, no matter how trusted or protected, is immune to systematic corruption when confronted with the enormous sums of money generated by drug trafficking. The judicial system is supposed to be the ultimate guardian of justice and the rule of law. If drug cartels can systematically corrupt judicial systems spanning 7 states and 234 judges, then we must accept that any institution can potentially be corrupted. The Sinaloa cartel treated corrupting American judicial systems as a business investment. They allocated resources, developed strategy, implemented that strategy methodically over 12 years, and achieved their objective of controlling judicial outcomes in a significant portion of the United States. This level of strategic thinking and execution by a criminal organization is deeply concerning. Second, this case reveals a complete systemic failure of oversight and accountability mechanisms. 234 judges were accepting bribes, making corrupt decisions, and accumulating unexplained wealth over 12 years. How did judicial oversight bodies, bar associations, state ethics commissions, and other accountability mechanisms fail to detect this corruption? The answer appears to be that these oversight systems were designed to catch individual bad actors, not systematic corruption involving significant percentages of judges in entire states. When corruption is widespread rather than isolated, normal patterns that might trigger investigation become normal within that corrupted system. Third, this case shows the limitation of traditional law enforcement approaches to fighting drug cartels. Federal and state law enforcement agencies were making arrests, building cases, and prosecuting drug traffickers throughout this 12-year period. But those efforts were being undermined at every step by corrupt judges who dismissed cases, excluded evidence, and overturned convictions. You cannot win a war against drug trafficking through law enforcement alone if the judicial systems that are supposed to hold criminals accountable are themselves corrupt. This case demonstrates the need for comprehensive approaches that address corruption, strengthen institutional integrity, and reduce demand for illegal drugs. Fourth, this case raises profound questions about justice for the thousands of people affected by corrupt judicial decisions. What happens to defendants who were wrongly convicted because corrupt judges wanted to appear impartial by occasionally ruling against cartel interests? What happens to victims of crimes whose cases were dismissed by corrupt judges? What happens to communities that suffered from drug trafficking because corrupt judges ensured that traffickers faced no consequences? The damage done by 12 years of systematic judicial corruption cannot be fully repaired. Many of those who benefited from corrupt decisions have disappeared or died. Evidence has been lost. Witnesses' memories have faded. Some injustices can never be corrected. So where do we go from here? The 234 arrested judges will face federal prosecution. Given the overwhelming evidence, including recorded conversations, financial records, case pattern analyses, and cooperating witness testimony, most are expected to plead guilty. The sentences will range from 15 to 40 years in federal prison, depending on each judge's level of involvement and role. All 234 judges have been immediately removed from office. The 7 affected states face the monumental task of replacing them while maintaining functioning court systems. Several states have requested federal assistance and have asked retired judges to return to service temporarily. The Department of Justice has established a special unit to review approximately 23,800 cases affected by judicial corruption. This review will take years and will cost hundreds of millions of dollars for the judicial system nationally. This case has prompted calls for fundamental reforms in how judges are selected, monitored, and held accountable. Congress is considering legislation to create new federal oversight mechanisms for state judicial systems. Multiple states are proposing constitutional amendments to strengthen judicial accountability. But beyond reforms, this case should force all of us to recognize that the enormous profits from illegal drug trafficking represent an existential threat to American institutions. As long as drug trafficking generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually, criminal organizations will have the resources to corrupt any institution they choose to target. We cannot simply arrest our way out of this problem. We need comprehensive approaches that reduce demand for illegal drugs, treat addiction as a public health issue rather than purely a criminal justice issue, strengthen institutional integrity across all levels of government, and address the root causes that make drug trafficking so profitable. For the people of 7 states who relied on judicial systems that were fundamentally corrupt for 12 years, the betrayal is profound. Justice was for sale. The rule of law was a fiction. The foundation.
You see that? 1 day in jail for 6-7 pounds of fentanyl? Where they do that at? Have you ever heard of it? You got to know there's something going on when you start seeing shit like that. But it's crazy because that just took place in St. Louis like this past week. And they've been locking their ass up shit for the past 2-3 weeks. So they'll probably be spreading their way further into the country as far as, coming from the West Coast, moving towards the East, and see how far it go. But yeah, corruption at its finest. But do your boy a favor, them thumbs up, like, comment, share. Tell me what y'all thoughts on that. Y'all got any crazy stories or scenarios that fit with this? Go on, drop them down in the comments. Let us know. Let's get this conversation started. Let's bring awareness. See, even these judges, they be corrupt and crooked. And they told you from the highest level of the state all the way down to traffic violation judges. Until next time, I'm out.